The steel bell slipped beneath the chop like a slow-falling lantern, yellow paint fading to green, then to the cold gray that swallows everything. Cables thrummed out from the winch aboard the rescue ship, and men on the Falcon's afterdeck leaned over the rail as if they could will strength down the line. Spray stung faces and soaked cuffs. Inside the bell, gauges ticked, oxygen valves hissed, and a telephone handset hung ready. The wire crackled. First nothing, then a voice that sounded as if it had been dragged across miles of gravel. "We hear you." 240 feet below, on a seafloor of hard sand off New Hampshire, the submarine Squalus sat with her bow high and her stern drowned. In the forward compartments, 33 men were alive, breathing thin air and counting breaths. In the after compartments, 26 were already beyond rescue. The first chamber run began. It had gone wrong the day before, May 23, 1939, on a morning so clean it looked made for a postcard. Light wind, tidy whitecaps, the Isles of Shoals sharp on the horizon. Squalus was new and tight, out of Portsmouth Navy Yard for trials. Lieutenant Oliver F. Naquin worked through the dive checklist with a crew that knew their stations the way a hand knows a pocket. The first submergence came and went smoothly. The second dive ended before anyone could finish the words, "Main induction." The big airway that feeds the diesels on the surface failed to close. Seawater shot down through ducting and hammered into the engine rooms. Lights died. The boat pitched as the stern flooded and the forward sections heaved up. Men slammed bulkhead doors and dogged them until their palms burned. The hull thudded into the bottom and settled at an angle that made every step a calculation. Darkness. Then the bluish hum of battle lanterns. Naquin ordered the telephone buoy released. The small yellow marker shot to daylight, paid out its cable, and bobbed in the swell, the handset inside protected by a metal dome. Up top, the submarine Sunken, Squalus's near twin, snagged the buoy and took the call. Aft compartments flooded. Position near the shoals. 33 forward, a signal hoist went up. Boats churned out of Portsmouth. The rescue ship Falcon arrived with gear the Navy had never used for real. That gear had a backstory written in grief. For years, peacetime submarine accidents had ended in memorials and widows. A forceful officer, Charles Swede Momsen, decided the ocean would not have the last word. He helped invent a rubberized breathing bag, the Momsen lung, for emergency ascents. Then he pushed for a steel rescue chamber, a bell that could be lowered by cable, mated to a submarine's escape hatch, and ferried men to the surface without drowning them or bending them. Another submariner, Alan McCann, turned drawings into bolts and flanges. Sailors called the result the McCann chamber. It had been tested in exercises. It had never carried living men up from a real wreck. On the Falcon's wet deck, divers checked each other's lines and hammered frost-stiff fingers against brass fittings. Chief Boatswain's mate Orson Crandall took charge of the chamber crew. With him were Chief Machinist's mate William Batters, Chief Radioman James McDonald, and Torpedo Man's mate John Michalowski, men who had spent years around hard problems. They ran through the sequence until it sounded like prayer. Lower, sound, locate hatch combing, pull suction, equalize, crack, secure, load, rise. The bell went over the side. The cable paid out in measured feet. A tremor climbed up the line into waiting hands. Bottom. Silt rolled when the bell touched the submarine's skin. The crew worked guidelines and felt, more than saw, the ring around the forward escape trunk. The chamber's rubber gasket kissed steel. Suction held. Inside Squalus, men stared at the circle of hatch metal they had been watching like a clock. The first sliver of light appeared. Cold water spilled. Then the hatch swung through its arc, and the chamber's cramped interior yawned like a stairway to the sun. The first trip took 7, the weakest, the shivering, the ones who had begun to slide into the gray place where thoughts slow and hands forget to grip. The chamber rose at a pace measured against pressure and fear. It slammed against the Falcon's side in the swell, and deckhands dragged it into the cradle as a medic reached for the latch. Daylight hit faces that looked a decade older than yesterday. A petty officer wrapped a sailor in a blanket that steamed in the wind and pushed a mug of broth into his hands. Down below, Naquan kept the forward spaces organized because organization is oxygen. He rotated men to keep them from folding, wiped condensation so it wouldn't drip on nerves, swapped out exhausted soda-lime canisters, and used calm sentences like tools. The second run descended. This time 9 men came up. A third followed. The crew in the Bell never rushed the steps. Every hookup had to seal, every equalization had to be right, every latch had to seat cleanly. Clouds stacked and gray rain hissed across the Falcon's deck. The sea didn't care if the rescue was historic. On one run, a line fouled and the chamber slewed off the mark. Batters eased into the near-freezing black with a diver's stubborn confidence, found the snag, and freed it by feel. Back at the cradle, someone swore once in gratitude. Each time the Bell returned to Squalus, the boat felt more like a corridor of echoes. Survivors waited in crouches and knee presses because the tilt made standing wasteful. They breathed on 4 counts. They passed the word forward. Again. The last ascent carried Naquan, who refused to leave until the count satisfied him that no one living waited for steps on the ladder. When the chamber knocked into its cradle for the final time and the latch blew, the numbers became a headline. 33 saved from 240 feet. Below, in steel rooms that had filled in a heartbeat, 26 names no bell could lift stayed with the hull. Rescue was only the first chapter. Salvage divers tunneled air into compartments, sealed brakes, and lashed on pontoons. Twice the boat shrugged free and dropped back like a sulking whale. Divers cursed in their helmets and went down again. Weeks later, Squalus broke the surface streaming oil and history. Tugs nosed her home. Shipyard crews rebuilt her and gave her a new name, Sailfish. The ocean hates a neat ending, so it drafted one anyway. In 1943, Sailfish torpedoed the Japanese carrier Chuyo. Among the dead were American prisoners captured from Sculpin, Squalus's old friend, lost in combat. A submarine raised in peace had, under a new name, sent down a ship that held men from its wartime sister. The loop felt cruel and too perfectly circular for comfort. Back on the New England coast in 1939, families of the 26 gathered in a cold chapel and soaked handkerchiefs through. Survivors in loaned coats walked the pier and told their pieces of the story until the edges dulled. The slap of seawater as the induction valve failed, the sprint to slam a hatch, the metallic taste of air left too long in pipes, the knock of the bell that sounded like a second chance. On the Falcon, a messman wrote home that he had watched men climb out looking like ghosts who had decided at the last second to turn back. The Navy hung the rescue chamber from cranes for school classes to see and kept the program alive. Submarines drilled on the lessons Squalus wrote in steel. Get the marker buoy up, stay put if you can. Keep order as if order were air. Trust the chamber, even if you don't trust luck. Momsen and McCann became not just names on equipment, but reasons that crews believed they could come back from a bad day. The Medal of Honor went to Crandall, Batters, McDonald, and Michalowski, and it felt less like ceremony than like a receipt for work done against a clock. Years later, museum visitors would walk under the bright painted bell and try to imagine the feel of a gasket catching on a hatch ring at the bottom of the Atlantic. They would read small plaques and large numbers. They would step into daylight, thinking courage had started when the bell went over the side. The truth began earlier, when a handful of officers refused to accept that "all hands lost" was the only line a Navy could write under the word submarine. The dividends came on a gray day when a phone line crackled, a winch paid out, and men below answered a voice from the surface with 3 words that changed everything. "We hear you." On that first descent, when the chamber disappeared and the sea tried to claim the line, a boatswain's mate on the Falcon reached down and gripped the steel cable with both hands. It didn't strengthen the wire, didn't change the weight, didn't help physics 1 inch. But it was the right instinct. Hold and don't let go. The line tightened. The bell found the hatch. The hatch opened. Air moved. Men climbed. Thank you for listening to the Sunken Ledger. Subscribe for more true stories from the depths.